being that it is Hanukkah, you like the Hanukkah for the foreigners? Being that it is Hanukkah, we're going to start the lighting of the candles here any minute. So please, if you want to be part of the candle lighting ceremony, then come on inside. This is the time. Okay, we're going to start. So Mr. Rabbi Persoff is going to lead us in the lighting of the candles.
Okay, so what we're going to do now, I'm going to say two brachot, two blessings. You're going to have the words on the screen. Then I'm going to light, actually before the blessings, I'm going to light this one, because this isn't part of the candles. We only light 4 candles. I'll explain what this middle one is, the shamash. Then I'm going to sing something you're not going to have on the screen, a small song in Hebrew, which actually says, these candles, hanerot halalu, kodeshim, they are holy, and we are not allowed to use them. And that's why actually, besides the candles that we light each day, we light another candle. So if I do, for any reason, use the light, now we have light. But we have to remember that when people didn't have light, so it's very easy to use the light from the candles. You're not allowed to use the light from the menorah, from the Hanukkah menorah, for anything else. Afterwards, we're going to sing Ma'od Sul, not the whole song. The song Ma'od Sul actually tells the story, the history of the Jewish people. The first verse that we're going to sing is about Hanukkah. But then it goes back to our story in the exile when we were in Egypt, and then the Babylonian exile, and then what happened when Hashem saved us from the Persians, from Achashverosh and Haman, the Purim story, which happened before the Hanukkah story. Then we have another verse about the Hanukkah story, the Greeks that came here to the land of Israel. And the last verse, that we're not going to sing, but it's part of Ma'od Sul, actually says that we want and we pray to Hashem that He will keep us strong. And that's actually what happened. Ma'od Sul was written quite a few hundred years ago. I don't know exactly, maybe 300, 400 years ago. But now, actually came back. And here we are in the land of Israel. And there's no Egyptian empire. It's not Egypt that we have now. There's no Babylonian empire. There is no Persian empire. There is no Greek empire. There is no Roman empire. But the Jewish people are still here. That's the story of Hanukkah. That's what it's all about. A small light from here that can spread out to the whole world. So you can put here, we have the blessings. Here you have it, also the translation and transliteration. As we said, this isn't part of the blessing itself. ברוך אתה אדוני אלוהינו מלך העולם אשר קידשנו במצוותיו וציוונו להדליק נר חנוכה. ברוך אתה אדוני אלוהינו מלך העולם שעשה ניסים לאבותינו בימים ההם בזמן הזה. הנרות הללו שאנו מדליקים, הנרות הללו שאנו מדליקים על הניסים ועל הנפלאות ועל התשועות ועל המלחמות. מעות צור ישועתי לך נאה לשבח תיכון בתפילתי ושם תודה נביח לתכין מטבח מצרם נביח. אז אגמור בשיר מזמור חנוכת המזבח. אז אגמור בשיר מזמור חנוכת המזבח.
Wonderful. Now we're going to get into our next session here.
So we'd like to talk a little bit about specifically Cry for Zion. It's a movement that is hosting this convention and the organization. And it's an organization for Jewish sovereignty on the Temple Mount that Doron Kedar started. And in order that Israel would exercise Jewish sovereignty on the Temple Mount in order that they would guarantee Jewish rights on their most holy place. So we have a petition that we formulated with the help of legal experts that is addressed. We're addressing it to the Prime Minister, to the High Court in Israel, to the Mayor of Jerusalem, and we included it in the resource, the resource magazine that you all got with you, a copy of the petition. And I would just like to read it here, what it says. It says, Petition for Jewish sovereignty on the Temple Mount. We are the voice from the international community that supports the Jewish people's rights to sovereignty over Mount Zion, the Temple Mount. We appeal to the ruling bodies of Israel to exercise their full legal sovereignty, guaranteeing Jewish rights on their most holy place. We, the undersigned, hereby declare that, 1, the Temple Mount is the holiest place on earth for the Jewish people. It was here that King Solomon built the first holy temple 3,000 years ago. Here the Jewish temples stood for centuries before the Al-Aqsa Mosque became the third holiest site for Muslims after Mecca and Medina. 2, the state of Israel has an obligation to uphold Jewish sovereignty and international human rights on the Temple Mount, which include freedom of worship. At present, non-Muslims are discriminated against and are not even allowed to move their lips in silent prayer, contrary to numerous Supreme Court rulings. At the Western Wall, which is under Jewish sovereignty, people from all over the world are welcome to respectfully pray. 3, more than 1,000 experts from 30 countries around the world have acknowledged that East Jerusalem is not an occupied territory under international law, and that the state of Israel has officially declared its sovereignty over all of Jerusalem. 4, Jewish sovereignty over the Temple Mount is in the best interest of the human, civil, and religious rights of all people groups in Israel, including the Arab minorities. We, therefore, appeal to the ruling bodies of Israel to exercise their full legal sovereignty, guaranteeing Jewish rights on their most holy place. For on my holy mountain, on the lofty mount of Israel, declares the Lord God, there all the house of Israel, all of them, shall serve me in the land. So I would encourage you to go to cryforzion.com and sign this petition. It's a serious petition. It's done. It's not just, we want new bathrooms at Walmart. It's a real deal, okay? And it's serious. But we need Christians and people of goodwill from around the world to sign this petition, and we will deliver it to the ruling bodies of Israel. Jerome, would you like to say more about that?
Well, what I would like to say is that you need to understand our struggle is an eternal struggle. It's not something that just started yesterday. Originally, the Maccabees were the ones truly that were fighting against this discrimination, specifically against the Jewish people, specifically against Jewish observance, as Rabbi Tully Wise was explaining very beautifully this morning. This is the difference with Hanukkah, is that we weren't necessarily physically attacked, but we were spiritually attacked. And the attack against us praying on the Temple Mount is a spiritual one. It's not necessarily a physical one, although unfortunately it's also led to much bloodshed throughout the generations as a result of that specific spiritual conflict, so to speak, and preventing us from praying on our holy mountain. And so my inspiration really, I would say, comes from the Maccabees. It comes from Ezra and Nehemiah, the first Zionist movement in the Jewish people's history, as that was truly the first return to Zion. And I believe that we're going to see a repeat of what we saw in Ezra and Nehemiah as a prophetic cycle that repeats itself, if you will. It's almost uncanny how one for one, if you read the narrative, and if you don't know the story, you should read it. Ezra and Nehemiah, it's in your Bible. Also, you should read the book of Maccabees. The book of Maccabees is a very, very good resource for today as well, because that's the same reality that I find myself in today, where Jews are wanting to not really be Jewish. They're not proud to be Jewish, like sometimes there's this debate during Yom Ha'atzmaut, should we fly our flag, not fly our flag, all this stuff. We don't have this patriotism like you have, let's say, in North America, okay? And that's somewhat connected to, I think, somehow in the psyche of the Jewish people, of this, almost like we're ashamed to be Jewish. We're ashamed to be proud to be who we are. And that's something that I see that the Maccabees came very strongly against, and God blessed them for it and gave us over 200 years of sovereignty and freedom from that religious oppression by the Greco-Assyrian Empire. And I'm just going to read to you what Judah the Maccabee tells his warriors, and basically how he encouraged them. And this is how I feel encouraged today on this particular issue. So in the book of Maccabees, like I said, you can read it. It's also a good book to read if you haven't. First book of Maccabees, chapter 3, verses 58 through 59. That's how you can find it online when you Google it. Prepare yourselves for battle and be courageous. Be ready early tomorrow morning to fight these Gentiles who have joined forces to attack us and destroy us and our temple. It is better for us, and this is really what I feel needs to be the battle cry, if you will, of the Jewish people, and we need to internalize and understand this. It is better for us to die fighting than to stand idly by and watch the destruction of our nation and our temple. And I believe today, what we see in our society with the secularization that is very aggressive against the biblical Zionism, as I called it, is very sad. And it's creating such a divide, and the very opposite of this mentality, which I believe this needs to be the mentality of the people of Israel. That it's better for us to die than to watch our nation run after the gods of the nations, run after McDonald's, run after the style and the fashion of the nations, etc., etc., etc. Okay? I mean, I'll give you a little example. When you have the Hanukkah parade that just took place here in Jerusalem, what did you see? You saw Macy parade-style balloons flying down the streets of Jerusalem. We're mimicking the nations. This is not a Jewish authentic message that we're showing to the world. When you go to the YMCA, you're going to see a huge Christmas tree, and we all sing Kumbaya. Isn't this amazing and wonderful? I don't think that's wonderful. We don't need to have a Christmas tree in Israel to show our tolerance and love towards Christianity. What we should have is a huge Hanukkah sitting there, lighting up the world and showing the world that we are proud Jews and we're proud of our identity and who we are. Which will translate into a passion and a zeal for God's holy mountain, and not it doesn't matter, or there's better, more important things like unity and love and coexistence and things like that. Well, I don't agree with that. I think the most important thing is fighting for truth, fighting for tzedek, and rak tzedek you are to lirdof, to run after, to chase, it says. We are to chase after justice. And it's not talking about man's justice, it's talking about the justice based in written in the Torah of Israel that God has given us at Mount Sinai, not a justice of man. And that's not what we're seeing in the land of Israel today. And my passion, my hope, is by having godly God-fears from the nations coming and showing your passion, your zeal, your support in this version of Israel, that's going to hopefully wake us up and go, oh wow, if the nations are interested in our God, if the nations are interested in our holy mountain, if the nations are interested in our Torah, if the nations are interested in Yehudah, Shomron, and the Temple Mount being unified and having Jewish sovereignty, well, maybe we need to wake up. That's my hope, that's my desire to see in our message that we're reaching out to the Christian Zionists in the world.
So, excuse me. I'd like to roll the clip that we have from Cry for Zion about this petition.
Hi, I'm Don Kida with Cry for Zion. Cry for Zion is about the holiest place in the world. It's about justice. It's about freedom. Cry for Zion is about upholding the law and fighting for the rights of people to pray without fear. The Temple Mount in Jerusalem, Mount Zion, is the holiest place on earth for the Jewish people. Here, King Solomon built the first holy temple 3,000 years ago. Here the temple stood for centuries before the Al-Aqsa Mosque became the third holiest site for Muslims, after Mecca and Medina. Today, on the Temple Mount, all non-Muslims are discriminated against and are not even allowed to move their lips in silent prayer, contrary to the law and international human rights. Especially Jews are continuously harassed and abused, forbidden from bringing a Bible, and even their access is severely restricted. Cry for Zion is not about extremism. It's about confronting extremism with justice and to say, wait a minute, let's stop appeasing true extremism, bullying, violence, and hate speech. Cry for Zion is not primarily an organization. It's a movement of Jews and Christians from around the world to see change come to Jerusalem and justice on the Temple Mount. The Temple Mount is really the key Israel issue of our day. Do the Jewish people have a right to this land? If this is true, it's even more true about the Temple Mount. Then why is it that in the heart of the capital of the Jewish state,
Jews are abused the most. The only place Jews cannot pray is their own holiest place. Stand with the Jewish people for freedom on the Temple Mount. We can see a change in our generation. Join the movement. To donate, click here.
So we really encourage all of you, this is an action that you can practically take. I also encourage you to ascend the Temple Mount. Tomorrow there's an opportunity to do that, which many of you are participating in, respectfully, in a respectful manner for a holy place. And as I loved what the rabbi this morning was introducing, that we don't go to the Temple Mount to tourist, to just tour, to look at things. It's God's holy mountain, and we go there to connect with him. So I really encourage you to do that, and more Christians to come, and that is really what's changing things on the ground in one sense, is ascending the Temple Mount, Jewish people ascending primarily most of all, but also all Christians to come and to ascend the Temple Mount in a respectful manner. That's one thing you can do. To sign this petition to help us in this movement. And one thing about this is that really, we talk about fight and battle and all these terms like this. Of course there is. When it comes to defense in the state of Israel, there is a real, violence that does happen at times, because intolerant forces want to come against the Jewish people. But a lot of this is a battle and a war of ideas, an ideological battle, a battle for education. And that is mostly what this convention is about, is for education. And so we've actually started a new television show that we host together called Temple Mount Report. And it's going to be airing on different TV networks around the world, but primarily on YouTube. If you didn't know, around the time of the 2016 election in the United States, alternative media and legacy media reached a parity. And now alternative media has gone beyond traditional television media in the world right now. And so it's primarily a YouTube show. And that's what most people watch. You could see the stats, by the way, on the average person's consumption of YouTube per day, and you would be shocked. But it's a show dedicated to the Temple Mount, the holiest place on earth. And we have some of these guests, some of these amazing people that have been speaking today to share and to dig into different aspects, the political, the legal, maybe the archaeological. What about its history? All these different aspects. And Duran, you want to share about that?
Well, yeah, as John mentioned, we have done our best to handpick some of the best people that we can think of who really know what they're talking about and have years of experience, and sharing that with the world through our program. And so if you're not following us on YouTube, then I highly recommend that you write right now so you don't forget. It's called Temple Mount Report. Okay, so you go to the Temple Mount Report YouTube channel, follow us, and then you're going to get the latest information once it's released on the Temple Mount. And then you can share that. Again, we want to impact more people. Well, share it. Don't just consume it for yourself and say, well, I'm glad I got all that wonderful information. You have to be activists. There's something you need to understand. A lot of the, conservative camp, all right, the conservative camp, politically speaking or religiously speaking, is not very good at being active. You're good at having the, let's say, right idea, because you're rightist, you have the right idea. No, I'm joking. And so, because you think, okay, we know what's right and we're happy with that, and you're content with your opinion, but you need to be active in sharing that with your network. Okay, so you have 5 people in your network. Well, tell 5 people in your network what you believe. where you stand on these issues, and say, oh, you heard about this thing that's going around the world, this book or this TV episode about these myths. Well, here's some good information I think you should check out as well. Simple ways like that will help get the message out and help change opinion, or at least affect opinion, and then hopefully also bring people into supporting what we're doing. And then you don't have to be feeling like you're the only person in town who understands what's happening, so to speak.
So we'd like to show you a clip from the Temple Mount Report right now.
Hi, I'm Don Kedal. Welcome to the Temple Mount Report. We are starting a new TV series called Temple Mount Report that is going to be addressing the issue of the Temple Mount, the holiest place on earth. With my co-host John Anderson, we are going to take you through the issue of the Temple Mount from the archaeology, the history, the theological background, basically covering every aspect of this issue. In our show, we're going to uncover the biblical history of Jerusalem. So by following us on our Temple Mount Report, you're going to find out exactly what is the story behind this oil lamp and many other beautiful finds that we have here in Jerusalem to tell the story of the history of the Temple Mount, both past, present, and future. Our show will be airing on TV networks that will be broadcasting all over the world, including on social media and here on YouTube. Don't forget to subscribe and ring the bell so that you can be the first in the know.
All right, we're going to introduce our next speaker. He is the executive director of an amazing organization called Hayuvel. So this is good. I won't get my face all the time up here. I'll get somebody else. He's a good friend. His name is Zach Waller. And Hayuvel is a nonprofit organization that brings hundreds of Christian volunteers to the heartland of Israel every year to serve Jewish farmers in Israel. And he has been, and Hayuvel in general, his whole family, and their whole movement has really been an inspiration to me when it comes to the Temple Mount. And also they work a lot in Samaria and Judea and these regions. And we really feel that at the root of these issues that we're dealing with when it comes to Judea and Samaria is the Temple Mount. So it's such an honor and a privilege and a blessing to have Zach Waller here. Please make him feel welcome.
All right. Thank you, John, Daron, and the Cry for Zion team. Really a blessing and an honor to be here. I think I'm going to take my name badge after this and frame it, put it on my wall so I can remember I was part of that conference. Remember back then when it all started and this huge thing took place? So I'm very, very excited to be here and honored to be able to share for a few minutes. I guess the question is, why is the Temple Mount important to me? I guess to put it really short, is I believe in God and I believe in the Bible. And it's pretty clear there that this is something I need to be excited about because God is excited about it and God's people should be excited about it. That's just the short answer. The longer answer is that I think it's all about relationships, right? It's about coming to know God and who He is, and as we come to know Him, how do we do that, right? How do we have a relationship with God, this Master of the universe? How do we come to know who He is? And my dad, some of you guys know our story. Actually took a huge step of faith quite a few years ago. My dad's Tommy Waller. He's the one who started Hayuvel. But he took this relational thing really serious. He had spent 13 years working for a business called Federal Express. And he all of a sudden realized that his family needed him, that me as his son and my mom, his wife, needed him at home, and that if he continued at the pace he was going at, working so many hours at this management position for Federal Express, which was an American dream thing is, it was the ultimate place to be. He was making lots of money and everything, but the relationships weren't where he felt like they needed to be. And so he made a big decision. He quit his job at Federal Express and took a much less lucrative position as a farmer in Tennessee because he wanted to have a relationship with his family. He wanted to come home and be dad. And I think God, our Heavenly Father, is the exact same way. He wants to have a relationship with us, right? He wants to have a home that we can come to, that we can experience Him. It was mentioned earlier, a place to be seen and to see. So this is God's house, right? That's what it says very clearly in Scriptures. It's God's house, a place where we can come to be seen and to see God. All the way back to the Garden of Eden, right? That was the original intent. God wanted us to have a place where we could walk together with Him, to be with Him in the garden, to fellowship with Him. That was God's original intent. And some people ask, how come there's not more written about the creation? This seems like a really huge deal, that God created the whole world, and we don't have a whole lot of information on how it happened. It's like a chapter, a little bit more about what happened. And I like to liken it to a story of, if I wanted to do something really special for my wife, maybe, I've always had this dream to build a little log cabin where she could, or where we could stay. And this really beautiful log thing, from Tennessee, so we have all these trees. And I want to build a log cabin. And then I could take my sweetheart off too, and me and Becca, we could have special times in this cabin. And what if I took her into this cabin and then I said, you know what, that tree right there, it took me about half an hour to chop it down, and the nails I used for it, it took this much time. And I just started going through all the details about how I built the cabin. That would just be nonsense, right? No, I built the cabin because I want to spend time with my wife there, right, and have a relationship. That's why God made this world. That's why He created the garden, so we could have a relationship with Him, right? So to have a relationship, you have to have time, and you have to have a place. If I said, I want to meet with you, I want to get to know you, and I said, let's meet at this certain place, but I didn't give you a time, probably wouldn't meet up, right? And if I said, hey, there's a certain place, or at a certain time, but I didn't give you a place, we definitely wouldn't show up at the right spot, right? So God chose a specific place. He chose the Temple Mount here in Jerusalem as the meeting place, as a place where people can come together to see and be seen, to have a relationship with Him. And that's why I feel like the Temple Mount is a huge, huge, huge thing, and why I'm so excited to be a part of this conference is because we're talking about relationship with God. We're talking about a place where we can join God in His house for the feast, right? And for me, as a Christian, as somebody that has lived outside of Israel, now coming in to join myself to her, the Scripture is very clear. I can come and pray in God's house. I can come up for the Feast of Tabernacles, and a little plug here, I can come and harvest grapes on the mountains of Samaria. So that's my story.
Zach is very modest, but really they're an amazing, amazing organization. Hayuvel, you should really check them out. And they do a lot for the sovereignty of Israel and support, practical support, putting your hands to getting action, getting into action. But now it's our privilege to introduce a leading voice in the Christian world for all temple-related topics. Joseph Good has dedicated over 35 years to the study of the Temple Mount from Christian, Jewish, and archaeological sources. He's a leading Christian voice, as I said, on all temple-related topics. He is the author of a book that's been mentioned here before called Measure the Pattern. His website is hatikva.org, and he also has a really educational website called JerusalemTempleStudy.com, JerusalemTempleStudy.com. And I really invite all of you to listen to this man and the wealth of wisdom over the years that he has accumulated around the temple and all its related issues. Thank you so much, Joseph Good, for coming.
Hanukkah Sameach, Shalom everyone. I'm going to talk to you about How do we know the temple cannot be at the city of David? But I'm a student of the Mishnah. If you're not familiar with the Mishnah, it's the foundation of the oral Torah. And one thing that we're taught in the Mishnah is you never start off with something negative. So I want to start off with something positive. The temple, we're told in the scripture, in the Tanakh, is the throne of God on earth. That's astounding. The place of the throne of the God of the universe. When Moshe goes up on the mountain, Moses goes up on the mountain, he's given 613 mitzvot or commandments. 271 of them directly relate to the temple. The very first thing that he's told when he goes on the mountain is bring Torah, free will offerings. 7 verses. Bring your blue, your purple, your red, the shani talat, the different colors. Bring your silver, bring your gold. 8th verse. Build me a mikdash. Build me a temple. Build it according to the pattern or the form, the way it's translated in English. But in Hebrew, it's much more powerful. It's the word tavnit, which means a blueprint. A blueprint has exacting detail. It has specifications. Build according to the tavnit, build the mishkan, so that I might dwell, I might shekan among you or among them. Now the last phrase, verse 9, it says, and just so shall you make it. Most translations leave out the word and. They just say, just so shall you make it. In other words, you cannot change it. You cannot deviate from it. It is to be exactly as God has laid down. The and, which is a single letter in Hebrew, the vav, according to Rashi, means that whole passage about build me a mikdash, build it according to the tavnit, build all the vessels according to the way that I instruct you, applies to every generation. Not to the people in the wilderness only. Not later in 1 Chronicles 28, verse 11. I'm going to read that one to you. This is where Hashem is speaking, God is speaking to King David. David's forbidden from building the temple, but he is allowed to prepare for its building. In 1 Chronicles 28, I have to hold it close. I am an old man. It says, then David gave to Shlomo, his son, the pattern, the tavnit, of the porch, of its houses, of its treasuries, and of its upper chambers and its inner rooms, and the place of the ark with the covering, the pattern of all, or the tavnit, the blueprint of all that he had by the Spirit, in Hebrew, by the Ruach, of the courts of the house of the Lord, of all the chambers round about, of the treasures of the house of God, the treasures of the holy things, also for the divisions of the Kohanim and the Leviim. And the next phrase, and for all the work of the service. In Hebrew, it's the word avodah. Not only did God give the temple and its pattern of how that it was to be constructed, how that the Kohanim, the priests and the Levites were to operate, he actually gave the services. It wasn't where that the leader of the Levitical choir said, what are we going to sing today? It was set out in a pattern. Everything was designed to teach us about his throne on earth, to teach us about the king of the universe, and to understand. He chose Jerusalem. He chose that place. The road this morning, I love that he started off with Hamakom, the place. The place. I wanted to say this before we talked about how we know that it cannot be at the city of David. how imperative it is that we have the right location, that we have the right understandings, because it's his throne. Because it is the place that he, the King of the universe, set apart. All right. So, somewhere I have a green button. All right. Could the temple have been located in the city of David? Myth or fact? I want to be a little bit stronger than that. I want to say lie or truth. Lie or truth. So here, we're looking at the topography of Jerusalem. And let's start over here. Well, actually, let's start on the right-hand side, where you have the Mount of Olives. It gives you the elevation. We come down, we have the Kidron Valley. Now, coming up from the Kidron Valley, we have Har Habayit, the Temple Mount. You notice this is Mount Moriah, and a passage in Yehezkel chapter 43, Ezekiel 43, it says that this is the law of the top of the mountain, the Temple Mount. First off, Ir David is the bottom of the mountain. So from the beginning of the scripture, the beginning of the description, it tells us it's at the top of Moriah. So then we come down our second middle valley. We have the Teropian, and we come up to what is today called Mount Zion. The whole city is called Zion, by the way, or Zion. And then on the west, we have the Hinnom Valley, which is the valley that's right outside our doors here. All right. Now, this is the Holy Land Hotel model, a map of it, that we have over at the Israel Museum. So we have the most ancient part of the city. I don't have a pointer on here, I don't think. So you just look at where I'm pointing. You see the Temple Mount? Look to the left of it. That somewhat white area is what we call the Ophel. Okay, so it's like a bridge that's going to join the lower part of the city called the City of David. So the City of David is going to be that area that comes down. It looks like the Florida Panhandle. Now, this is the place in the City of David that we've had several books. There have been two major books that have come out since 2002. One is called The Temple That Jerusalem Forgot. Okay, Jerusalem nor the Jewish people did not forget. But it places the temple down here. There was another book that followed this. There have been countless videos. Not hundreds of thousands of people watching these YouTube videos. It's gone into the millions. People are avid that everything, the Jews, the archaeologists, the politicians, it's all been a mistake. We can solve the Arab-Israeli conflict because it's not up by the Dome of the Rock, not up by the Al-Aqsa Mosque, but it is rather down at the City of David. Everybody's happy. Except you just moved the throne of God that he placed at a certain makom. It becomes sin. It becomes sin. Now, many people are caught into this by ignorance, but some are not, because the evidence is there. All right, so we're going to look. You see where there's a number 2, and, oh yeah, that helps. All right, if we look down by the number 2 coming up, first set of buildings, that is the approximate location where they're saying the temple is located. Now, that entire little Florida Panhandle, City of David area is 14 acres. 14 acres. Har Habayit, on the other hand, the Temple Mount, is 35 acres. All right, let's go forward. Over here we have the city of Bethesda. Do look at the top of the Temple Mount where you see a number 39. Oh, great. Thank you. All right. So here, this is the Fortress Antonia. Now, the Fortress Antonia is somewhat controversial. First off, the people that are saying that the Temple Mount is down at the City of David say all of this is the Fortress Antonia, and that this does not have enough room to meet the description of Josephus. Now, understand, only certain scholars have given it this small location and size, whereas others come all the way down into this area for the Fortress Antonia, and we'll talk about that as we go on. The rest we'll bypass for now. All right. So the points of the myth. Number one, the temple is not on the Temple Mount, but rather located a third of a mile down the hill on the Ophel and northern part of the city of David. Number two, that the Temple Mount was in reality the Fortress Antonia, which, and they claim, was built as a Roman fortress. That's important, that it was built as a Roman fortress, requiring the 35 acres of the Temple Mount in order to house the standard garrison of a Roman legion and its auxiliary suppliers and others associated with the fortress. It is claimed that there would have been 10,000 individuals housed within its walls. Oh, wrong one. All right. So, I have to look straight up. Here, this is the city of David. Very narrow, very long. Up here is the Ophel, and above it is what we call the Temple Mount. Here you're able to see. Doesn't that look like Florida to you? Kind of turned backwards. All right, here's the Temple Mount. Here's the Ophel. Right here, this is the Gihon Spring. Right here is where they're saying the temple is. All right, so it's going to be the northern part of the city of David and coming up into the Ophel. Here you can see the city of David, the Temple Mount, the Ophel. We're going to come down right about here is what's called the stepped stone structure. Remember that term, stepped stone structure. Right here, we're going to have David's palace, discovered by Elatmazar. All right? We have the Gihon Spring, new discovery right over here called the Accra. Let's go forward. By the way, everything that I'm saying we could put 30 minutes on. Okay, we could go into detail, talk about it. We don't have the time. So here, again, we have the temple, and according to the scripture on the Temple Mount, we also have another structure, which is King Solomon's palace. The palace of the first temple period kings, from the time of Solomon all the way to Zedekiah when the Babylonians come and carry them away. So we have two structures that we have to allow room for. Everybody with me? Now this is a reproduction. This is from the 2002 book. So here we have the Temple Mount. This is the Ophel. I want you to notice the size of the temple. I have a question for you. First off, according to Josephus, the word that it says for the garrison of the Antonia fortress is a cohort, which a cohort at full strength is 600 men. I don't have a problem with the Antonia having a full legion. I don't have a problem with that. I have a problem with they took the word cohort and said, oh, they mistranslated it. And it should be a legion. Okay? We're told that at the time of the Hagim, the festivals, when Jerusalem would swell with just people coming from everywhere, that the Romans would actually bring in from Caesarea a full legion. So I don't have a problem with that. I just have a problem with they're not giving you the actual words that are used. All right, so I have a question. Who do you think is going to be in the temple more? Where do you think is going to have more people? The Antonia or the temple? Okay, we'll see. All right. This is from Jewish Wars by Josephus. Now, Aristobulus, by degrees and unwillingly, gave credit to those accusations, and accordingly, he took care not to show his suspicion openly, though he provided to be secure against any incidents, so he placed the guards of his body in a certain dark subterranean passage, for he lay sick in a place called formerly the citadel, the Baris, Baris, though afterward its name was changed to Antonia. And he gave orders that if Antigonus came unarmed, they should let him alone, but if he came to him in his armor, they should kill him. He also sent some to let him know beforehand that he should come unarmed. The Baris fortress was built by the Hasmoneans, not by the Romans. And in fact, we believe that the fortress was actually there in the first temple period, because in the book of Nehemiah or Nehemiah, it refers to the Beerah. There was a problem with the Temple Mount. It had the Kidron Valley on its east. It had the Teropian Valley on its west. It had the Bethesda Valley coming through from the east, heading west. But on the northwestern side, there was high ground leading directly to the Temple Mount. Therefore, they constructed a dry moat known as a fosse. Picture this. Right here, this is the temple, my podium. And right here is our northwestern corner. They dig a moat and they build a fortress on the high ground to protect this corner. You go down the Western Wall Tunnel. Dan Bahat found the foundation trenches of the Baris. We have the evidence. All right, so another trip. We have fortresses all over the land. We have Masada. Masada was not built by Herod. Masada was enlarged and improved by Herod. It was built by Alexander Yune, the Hasmonean king. We have Macarius, built by Alexander Yune, enlarged by Herod in Jordan. This is where Yochanan Hamatville, John the Mercer, had his head cut off. We have Herodian, built by Herod. All of these were built by Jews. They're not Roman fortresses. They are going to be taken over and used by Romans, but it's not built as a Roman fortress. It originally will be a Jewish fortress, and then it will be taken from them. All right. So, another quote from Wars, Book 1, paragraph 118. And besides this, upon hearing Conus' complaint to his mother, she had compassion for his case and put Aristobulus, Aristobulus' wife and sons, under restraint in Antonia, which was a fortress already set of old, called the citadel, called the Baris. And it goes on, but later had the name of Antonia when Antonia was Lord of the East. In other words, the Baris was already there. Herod comes along, and as typical, just as he did at Masada, just as he did at Macarius, he enlarges. He makes it larger, but it's a Jewish fortification, built according to Jewish specifications. A legion, 6,000 men. A cohort, that's a legion at full strength. A cohort 400 to 600 men. The auxiliaries and the suppliers of materials. I have a question for you. How many of you have been to Masada? Most of the people in the room. You have 8 fortresses that are around Masada. 2 of them are Roman. You have one on the south, and you have one on the east and one on the west. And you have 6 other fortresses that look different. They're constructed different. They're auxiliary forces because the Romans didn't trust anyone. Auxiliaries were not allowed inside their fortresses. Slaves were not allowed inside their fortresses because of the revolt of Spartacus, the slave revolt. They were kept at a distance from all military installations. Suppliers were never inside the Roman fortresses. Everything these writers, these makers of these YouTube videos are saying is a lie. It is a myth. It is a fabrication from what we are told in all of the ancient documents, ancient archaeology, everything coming together. So, we're going to read from Jewish Wars. This is book 6, paragraph 423 to 428. This is where Josephus is talking about the Passover when the Romans come up and surround the city. So these high priests, upon the coming of that feast, which is called the Passover, when they slay their sacrifices from the 9th hour to the 11th, but so that a company not less than 10, this is the halakha, you have to have 10 people to have a Passover lamb. Not 10 belong to every sacrifice, for it is not lawful for them to feast singly by themselves, and many of us are 20 in a company. That's the maximum number you can have, is 20. Found the number of sacrifices was 256,500, which upon the allowance of no more than 10 that feast together amounts to 2,700,000 and 200 persons that were pure and holy. That's how many people would be at the temple during that week. I don't care if they have 10,000. I don't care if they double their number to 20,000. They're not even going to touch the number of people on a daily basis that would be in the Holy Temple. It's ludicrous. Absolutely ludicrous. Now, in the States, we have stores like J.C. Penney's. And what's a good store here? I want to say, what's the big Swedish furniture store? IKEA. IKEA is way too big for what they have. Cut IKEA in a fourth, and that's going to be the size of their temple. Realize the reality of what they're trying to sell you. It doesn't work. All right. So the Fortress Antonia, these are the scholars that have what we call the limited view. Dan Bahat, he's good. I would listen to anything this man says. I disagree with him on this point. Lee Brittmeyer, Michael Aviona, he built the Holy Land Hotel model. They're the ones that support that the Antonia was right here, just at the northern edge. Now, this is from Professor Ehud Netzer. He's the one that found Herod's tomb in Herodian, leading archaeologist on Herod. He has it not only up here where they have it, but penetrating into the mount. Go to the next picture. See the fosse? There's the fosse. All this area. This is where the cisterns of the Baris are. All of this area from up here, that's the Strethian Pool, all the way down to the moat. It's a gigantic area. It's huge. You could easily house 10,000 men. You could easily fulfill every description that Josephus gave of the Antonia. This is the area of the temple from here to here. All right, so here, this is where the fosse is. This is all the area up here. This is their parade ground. This is where they train. But this, right here, that was the northern edge of the Temple Mount. All right, so we have the walls around the Temple Mount. They are retaining walls. It's not the Temple Mount. It is the retaining wall. In other words, the way they built they're on a mountain. So a mountain comes up, and in order to build buildings on it, you have to level the foundation. So the way they did this is they built arches on top of arches on top of arches, and that required retaining walls to hold it all on the inside. Now, they're going to claim that the retaining wall around the Temple Mount, that was left alone. These writers in these YouTubes, they're going to claim that Titus didn't want that destroyed because that was the property of Rome. Well, they did a bad job of it because more than 2/3 of the retaining wall itself was destroyed by the Romans. Elat Mazar did a massive work of cataloging every stone, every Herodian stone in the entire Temple Mount. And you can get the work. It'll cost you $300 from the Israel Exploration Society. While we're there, let me mention, you want to get information from valid archaeologists. All right, so who are these valid archaeologists? Well, first recommendation is you can check with Cry for Zion. They'll tell you who is valid, who's not. Check with the Israel Exploration Society. Check with Biblical Archaeological Society in the United States, BAR, Biblical Archaeology Review. But there is so much out there on the internet, anything you see, validate it. And only validate it with good sources, with credible sources, by the people that know, that the people that are authorities, all right, and recognized authorities. All right. That the Roman general Titus spared the fortress Antonia from destruction. That is a claim that both of these books make, that they spared the fortress Antonia. I'm going to show you what Josephus says about it. From destruction, as it was imperial Roman property, and to garrison the troops following the destruction of the temple and Jerusalem, they claimed that the remaining retaining walls around the Temple Mount prove this. All right, these drawings are by Lee Rittmeyer. This is the southwestern corner. And this is how high, the gray is how high the original stone. Notice how much disappeared. Tremendous amount. All of the stairway, all that's left is an arch right here. On the eastern side, we have a tower. This was the pinnacle of the temple. It was the highest point of the temple. We have where it comes down, we actually have some windows that are left. We have an ancient gate that is left. But all of this was destroyed. All right, we're going to jump to the temple. I'm going to come back to the Antonia towards the end of this. This is the hypothesis that the temple had to be located just west of the Gihon Spring, located at the base, down at the bottom, of the western slope of the city of David. Actually, it should be the eastern slope of the city of David. Within the Kidron Valley, as this was the only water supply for Jerusalem. The Temple Mount did not use water from the Gihon Spring. They had their own independent water sources from cisterns that were on the Temple Mount that held up to 300 million gallons of water, as well as water that was brought in from what is called the Pools of Solomon, south of Bethlehem, as well as rainwater collection. They had ample water with more than 30 cisterns on top of the Temple Mount. Why? Well, because if the city falls, this is the fortification that will hold out, and they have to be self-sustaining. So that the southeastern ridge of Mount Moriah is also known as Sion. I don't have a problem with that. We have a scripture that actually says that. But they're saying that that is all that was Sion. The entire city. Look up every passage of Zion in the Tanakh, and you'll be able to tell for yourself. The entire city of Jerusalem was known as Zion. All right? As the temple was built within Sion, it must be located on this ridge known as the city of David or Ir David. That the size of the Temple Mount was 600 feet by 600 feet according to Josephus. Josephus does not say that. Josephus doesn't even come close to saying that. Understand that's 200 yards by 200 yards. You know, one of the tactics of the Nazis was don't tell the people little lies, tell them big ones. That's what we have a case here. Everything. It's not that you have a lie every 5 pages, you have a lie every 5 sentences. I do get passionate about it. All right. This is from Jewish Wars. We're going to see about the Tower of Antonia. And now Titus, he's the Roman general, gave orders to his soldiers that were with him to dig up the foundations of the Tower of Antonia and make him a ready passage for his army to come up. What had happened is the Jewish defenders within the temple dug a tunnel from the Temple Mount underneath the Fortress Antonia. Now, if you're down at the city of David, you can't very well do it because you'd have to dig through a mountain that rises a third of a mile going uphill. Okay? So they took this tunnel, they filled it with all kinds of straw, pitch, everything flammable, set it on fire. Their hopes were that the whole Antonia would collapse. Didn't happen. But they weakened the foundation so much that Titus was afraid it would collapse. So therefore he commanded it to be destroyed and for them to use that to make a road for him to bring his machines in. So the fact that they're claiming that the Temple Mount is the Fortress Antonia is denying the source they're using, Josephus, of what he says about the Antonia. All right, here's another one. In the meantime, the rest of the Roman army had, in 7 days' time, overthrown some foundations of the Tower of Antonia. That's true. There was one tower left. They eventually tore that down. But there was one tower that he left. It was firm. It was the highest tower. It was on the southeastern corner. And Titus climbed into that tower to watch the battle so that he could commend and honor and award those that proved valorous, and he could execute those that were cowardly. That means he has to be able to identify the soldiers. He's close enough from the Antonia to look down and say, oh, there's Jack. And there's Tony. Of course, it was all in Latin, okay? But he's able to see who they are. Not with what they have with the Temple Mount here, and we're a third of the mile away from where the fortress, from where the temple is. Okay, so the one bank was opposite the north. We're going to go forward. I don't want to run out of time. This is another one. For the Jews, by demolishing the Tower of Antonia, have made their temple square. So you see, the Antonia actually fell before the temple did. While at the same time they had it written in their sacred oracles that then should their city be taken as well as their holy house, when once their temple should become square. Jewish Wars 6:3-11. All right. Now, one of the big claims that everybody makes is Yeshua said, "Oh, not one stone would stand on top of another stone." How many of you have heard this argument? That's a proof that the temple could not be. First off, in the text that you have in Matthew, it says, we're going to start with, "Do you not see all these things? As surely I say to you, there shall not one stone be left upon another, nor that shall not be thrown down." Now notice, he came up to show him the buildings of the temple. I want to point out the buildings of the temple. That's true. On the top, we don't have any buildings that are standing. We don't have any stones that are standing one on top of another. However, I don't believe that was even what Yeshua was talking about, because the book of Luke. Now here we have Luke chapter 19, verse 41-44. And if you'll just drop down, he's talking about Jerusalem. It's going to be surrounded, that there's going to be surround you on every side and level you and your children within you to the ground, and they will not leave in you one stone upon another. Now notice here, he's talking about the city. He's talking about Jerusalem. Have you toured Jerusalem? I mean, there are all over the city, there are ruins from Jerusalem when it was destroyed by the Romans. Titus, and Josephus records Titus saying that you couldn't even recognize it as a city anymore. These quotes are in these books and in these videos. Well, wait a second. Here, we'll see Josephus. But for all the rest of the wall surrounding Jerusalem, it was so thoroughly laid even with the ground by those that dug it up to the foundations, that there was nothing to make those that came thither believe it, speaking of Jerusalem, had ever been inhabited. Now, that gives us the idea of there wasn't anything. It was total desolation, worse than Hiroshima. I mean, it's just let's go forward. This is the Herodian mansions, Jewish quarter. See these walls right here? They're up to my head. Oh, wait, we have stones standing on top of stone on top of stone. Look at this one. This is what we believe is the Zistos. It's in the Western Wall Tunnel Complex. Now, the Zistos was burned by the Zealots. There were three armies having civil war while they were fighting the Romans. One of the armies burned the Zistos, which was the public archive building. It's still standing. Now, notice, I'm 5'9". I could have me stand on top of my head and not reach the top of the wall. We have a whole wall, and I could take you all over this city. I could show you the third wall. The third wall, which is out past the garden tomb and so forth, I have to have a chair to get up on the wall. It's so high. In other words, what I'm trying to tell you, here you can see this is the building. Look how high the ceiling goes. Look at this column. All that's Herodian stone. What I'm trying to say to you is not one stone stands upon another stone, and the expression that it was leveled to the ground, you could no longer tell it was a city, were modes of expression meaning total defeat. We use all kinds of expressions today that if you're not from that culture, if you're not from that area or that time period, they don't relate to you. Did you ever watch Get Smart? Jaime? You didn't tell him to go take a hike. You meant, hey, get away from me, leave me alone. Don't ask me that. He goes and takes a hike literally, okay? But what I'm trying to say to you, that these are expressions that are being taken in the pashat, in the literal, and we can prove they're not true. All right? So, here's an example. This is out of the Mishnah. This is from the Tractate Tamim, which deals with the daily services. This is from Jericho. They could hear the sound of the great gate. That's the gate that opens the temple building. As it was opened. I don't think you can literally hear it from Jericho. It's about 15 miles away. All right? From Jericho, they could hear the sound of the magraphon. That is a water organ or bagpipes that were blown in the temple. From Jericho, they could hear the sound of the wood that Big made as a mukni for the basin, for the kior. It's going to be a big wheel that turned. All of these are spoken in a way that is very exaggerated to say it's significant, it's important, but we don't take them literally. Okay, so, all right, look at all the water. This is only a part. Look, this is water cistern, water cistern, water cistern, water cistern. That one holds 3 million gallons. Water cisterns, water cisterns, water cisterns. These two are not. These are original mikvaot, or immersion chambers. Here's your moat up here. These are tunnel systems. This is a tunnel here. This is a tunnel here. This is Solomon's stables, massive area. We have a lot of ruins from the Temple Mount that are documented not only in the Mishnah and the Tosefta, the Jewish writings, they're documented in the Temple Scroll. They're documented in Josephus. They're documented in ancient letters called the Letter of Aristeas. They are documented, if you know what to look for, in the Tanakh. You will find many of these references right in the Tanakh we're able to see them. They are charted out for us. So here we have, this is in the city of David, the northern end. This is what we call the stepstone structure. It was first discovered, this portion of it right here was discovered by one of our first great archaeologists, Kathleen Kenyon, in the early 1920s. Now, she was followed in 1975 by Professor Iga Shilo, who excavated, this was his area G. And he excavated all of this area, and he totally uncovered, he discovered two towers. There's a tower here, there's another tower right here. And he uncovered all this area, and he found what was called, covering it, what's called a glacis. Okay, a glacis in Hebrew is haklaka, which means a smooth area. What it is, a glacis, is you have a fortification. Now, the fortification, what you do not want is for an enemy to get up close to your wall, because you have what are called sappers. And they're going to come up and they'll work back and forth, loosening the stones and make the wall fall. That's what happened in Gamla. Okay? Second thing, and you don't want this, God forbid that they would get a battering ram up there. So, you build this slope area so that they cannot come up. Many of the places, not here in Jerusalem, but many of the other places, they put plaster on top of them. So that when the enemy comes, your defense is pour oil on the glacis, so that everybody's skiing backwards. Okay? Now, Igashilo discovered a glacis from the Hasmonean period over that stepstone structure. Nobody knew what the stepstone structure was for. I mean, it was very obvious. There were all kinds of theories about what it was for. Read a fascinating article in Biblical Archaeology Review several years ago. This was about 15 years ago, probably, by Eilat Mazar. Eilat Mazar is one of Israel's greatest archaeologists and a very wonderful lady to know. Tremendous. Okay? So she wrote about where King David's palace had to be based upon the scripture. It's kind of like, you know, in the cartoons, they'll take where a treasure's buried and they draw an X on the ground. And then the road runner comes along and he finds the X or something. Okay? So anyway, she basically did that. She said, okay, here is exactly where David's palace has to be, because it's south of the Ophel, but it's north of the Jebusite city. The Jebusite city was full. There was no more room in it, so he built to the north of it. So there were a number of people that read our article, and there were several organizations, various universities, and they said, boy, it would be great if we gave her the money. She discovered it, and then we get to have credit for her having found it. Okay? So she got all this money. So she started digging. Guess what she found? David's palace. David's palace. Now, why is this unique? It's just to the north of the Gihon Spring. Now, when I say just to the north, I'm talking about from where I'm standing to the back of this room. At the top of the mountain. The Gihon's at the bottom. But just as a bird flies, that's the distance we're talking about. Now, if you'll remember, David sinned, right? He sinned in numbering the people. So God sends an angel of the Lord, and David, we're told that David got up in the morning, he's in his palace, Nathan the prophet comes, and he said, you've sinned. You've sinned. And so David's repenting. It says David looked up, and he went up. Okay? Now, there's a problem if we place the temple down where they're placing it, because the altar that he's going to build, the site he's going to buy, he already owns. It's his house. It's like, okay, here's my couch, Here's the altar. What I'm telling you is it will not match Scripture. It is not, oh, well, maybe we could make it. There is no way you can make it. You have to deny what the Scripture is saying to arrive at this. Now, how big is this? By the way, if you're going to the city of David, we'll go down and look. I'm going to show you. Can you see this person here? There's a person right here. These are monumental stones. Look. Right there. See that? That's a person standing up. All right. Here is where they're saying the temple is. Here is where his palace is. You cannot build the temple where his palace is because that palace is still there at the time of Nehemiah. Chapter 3 and chapter 12. It's impossible. So, we're going to move to what's called this right here. Okay, here's David's palace. Here's the Kidron Valley. Here's the Temple Mount. You see it right here? That's the Temple Mount. All right, here's the road coming around. Now, you see this here? This was taken back in the early 1970s, late 1960s, after the Six-Day War. This was taken by Benjamin Mazar's excavation team. This is what is called the Gavati parking lot. We used to park there all the time. It was the best parking around the Temple Mount, but there developed a problem. It was called potholes. They had potholes so big that you could lose a bus in. Now, the guy that owned the parking lot, he wasn't making any money by people parking there. So he got an offer to sell the parking lot, and then we're going to put up a restaurant or a hotel or something. Well, people got wind of it. And they say, the best places to dig in a city are parking lots because you don't have new structures on them. And so, anyway, they raised the money, and instead they gave them a better offer than the Development Corporation, and so they turned it over to the Israel Antiquities Authority. And so they began this massive dig called the Gavati parking lot. All right? So, here's the parking lot right here. Here's David's palace. Same place. They're across the street from each other. When you leave David's palace, you walk about 15 feet and you enter the Gavati parking lot. All right? So, this came out in 2015. You can look it up on Wikipedia. All right? And it's a good article. Some of the articles on Wikipedia you got to, but everything here you can check out at the City of David for yourself. Buy the journals. There are journals down there that are put forth by the best archaeologists. So it says, in November 2015, the Israel Antiquities Authority announced the probable discovery of the Akra. Now, what is the Akra? It was a fortress built by Antiochus Epiphanes. It was built when the war with the Maccabees began, and they've been looking for it forever. According to archaeologists, Doron Ben-Ami, Yana, that's it. And Salome Cohen, excavating the Gavati parking lot, adjacent to the city of David. They had unearthed a complex of rooms and fortified walls they identified as the Akra. This places it slightly south of previous suggested locations on the Ophel. Finds include fortification walls, a watchtower measuring 4 by 20 meters, and a glacis, bronze arrowheads, lead sling stones, ballista stones were unearthed at the site, stamped with a trident, the emblem of Antiochus IV Epiphanes. These are indicative of the military nature of the site and the efforts to take it. The excavation also yielded coins from the reigns of Antiochus IV, that's Epiphanes, through Antiochus VII. You know the Maccabean Wars lasted 20 years. That they ended with Shimon Hasmoneh destroying the Akra 20 years later in the reign of Antiochus VII. As well as a multitude of stamped Rhodian amphora handles. All right, so here This is the glacis. Now, I don't want to go into detail. You can buy there's a report on it down at the City of David. It's tremendous, okay? Let me tell you, they even can tell you what month that the glacis was built based upon the pollen that they discovered inside. They can tell you what kind of plants were growing around. It's amazing. More amazing is that the glacis that was discovered by Igal Shiloh on the other side was part of the same glacis system. He didn't have enough information to correctly identify it. In fact, by the way, this is a wall of the Accra right here. There are lots of pictures that you could get. Here is the glacis. This is an Eli Bazaar's book. This is the glacis over the stepstone structure. All right? Now, they now have located 2 other sites, and they now know that the reason the Accra was so difficult to defeat is it occupied the entire ridge from the top to the bottom of the City of David. Well, we have a problem. If we're going to place the temple there, how did this building get stuck there? They're in the same location. And this was much later. So again, you see, it's impossible. All right. All right. Now, I've got 3 minutes. It says, if we go the other way westward, it began as the same place and extended through the place called Betzo, to the gate of the Essenes, and after that it went southward, having its bending above the fountain Siloam, where it also bends again toward the east at Solomon's Pool and reaches as far as a certain place which they call Ophlis, that is, in Josephus the Ophel, where it was joined to the eastern cloister of the temple. Notice that the Ophel is going to be south of the Temple Mount. All right. Are not your people dead? This is Titus speaking. Is not your holy temple gone? Now, read that. What it will say, I'm going to give you a paraphrase because I have so short time. But the temple's already destroyed, and the neighborhood where the Accra stood is still called the Accra. And so what we're told is that he gives the command to destroy the Ophel and the Accra after the temple's already destroyed. They can't be the same place. All right, I want to go forward. I have more that I could show you, but let's do this. The width of the City of David is 80 meters or 262.46 feet. That's across the top. The cubit, we know that there were 3 cubits used on the Temple Mount. We have identified 3 cubits. The largest is 23.04 inches. The smallest is 19.2 inches. Okay? Their cubit that they have is less than 6 inches. It's not a cubit. It has to be a cubit, it has to be a minimum of 14 inches. All right. I have one more slide. I want to read this. The bottom of the myth that the temple is located within the City of David denies the biblical, archaeological, geographical, and historical evidence. It denies the true site of the Holy Temple, the Temple Mount. The end result, and this is the important part, it is another attempt to say the Jews were wrong. They changed this and they changed that. We hear that all the time. The rabbis changed this. The rabbis changed that. The bottom line to this myth is that the temple is, to the myth that the temple is at the City of David is anti-Semitism. Is anti-Semitism of the worst kind. Of the worst kind. Because it's causing people to worship at a place that was not picked by God. At a place that is not His throne. When people turn to face towards the Temple Mount, God forbid that we would turn to the City of David. I like the City of David. But it's not the place chosen by God. We're not allowed to change this. We don't have that authority. This is, people say, hey, it's great. We don't have to worry. They can have their mosque and we have our temple. It's a lie. It is a dangerous and deadly lie. I'm going to stop. Time's out. Shalom, and thank you very much.
Joseph, hold on for a minute. Joseph? Mr. Good? I just would like to thank Joseph Good for the amazing job that he's done to really work on this, his life's work invested in the Temple Mount. It's amazing. It's just such a breadth of knowledge, and I'm so honored that he came here to speak on this topic. Thank you so much. We're now going to turn it over to Chris Mitchell.
Wow, this is fascinating. Some of the information, I think this is kind of world-class information that we're hearing right now. So we're going to have a panel. We'll have a 30-minute panel discussion right now, and then we'll have 25 minutes for question and answers from you. And I want to introduce first Harry Muskoff, Rabbi Harry Muskoff, coming up. He's with the Yark Report, and I think many of you have heard him already. And Anna-Rena Hyman, I first met Anna-Rena when we did a story on the city of David, and her breadth of knowledge and heart for the scriptures is so refreshing and inspiring. She's been with the city of David, but now with Aligned with Zion. So please welcome Anna-Rena as well. And Joseph, please come and join us on the panel as well. And you've just heard his expertise and breadth of knowledge that is just remarkable. So it's an honor to be here. Anna-Rena, I think I'll start with you. We did a story with you on the city of David, and by the way, it was one of the most popular stories we've ever done. It just went viral, so to speak, on the internet, and it was inspiring to so many people. And so tell us about the city of David and why it's so important for the archaeological discoveries that have been down there, not only to prove the Bible, but also refute some of the theories that are out there.
Thank you, Chris. Is this okay? I think the city of David and the discovery of that is very, very important because you guys, most of the people sitting here, but for the people also watching, it's the location of the ancient biblical Jerusalem. It's only been rediscovered 150 years ago, and for that I should actually thank Mr. Bob Carnook because he took it out to the people know about it right now, so give credit where credit is due. It's everything else that surrounds the theory that's really a little bit upsetting. I think the most important is to look at the facts. You have to go to the empirical proof that you can find. This goes to everybody that wants to make claims. If UNESCO wants to tell us that there's no biblical connection to Jerusalem, this is the same thing that we tell them. Come to the city of David and come and see it for yourself. If you find seals with the names as written in the book of Jeremiah, and you find a massive tunnel that Hezekiah actually dug, then how can you refute or how can you say that it doesn't exist? So we have to get to the empirical facts. Whatever we found or whatever the archaeologists found in the city of David at that specific spot, there's nothing connected to the temple itself. There was a certain service that happened there, and that's why we believe that it might be the place that when David HaMelech, when King David brought up the ark, that it resided there before Solomon built the temple, but ultimately it went to Temple Mount itself. If you go to the archaeology, that's, and this is a little bit difficult because we can't do archaeology on Temple Mount right now, but a few years back, the WAF wanted to build a mosque. And they literally just dug into what there was and they threw it out in a valley. And we went to collect all that dirt. Dirt is being now sifted from different places, also what we found closer to the Western Wall. And everything that we found there, they can literally now put together the tiles that was at the Second Temple period. It dates back to the Second Temple period, and it's the tiles of the temple. So why would you find tiles of the temple if if they say that there wasn't any temple there? So if you just by seeing what we find in the sifting project, we can slowly put the whole picture together again. The other thing that's very interesting, and I don't know how much was covered, I just want to say that when Eli Shukran went and he found this specific spot, the way that he found it refutes completely the theory itself. When they found it, there was a retaining wall, and it was built up to level this place of where Mr. Karnook puts the theory. And within that was placed stones, literally, intentionally they placed the stones there and they filled it completely up. It was with intention. So the question would be, why would they do that? And that's where we get to Jewish tradition. What I found in the video itself was that he actually attacks the Jewish tradition more than anything else between the lines. And here it goes about where the temple should stand the moment when we found the place. If we know where the place is, then you can't have any worship anywhere else. Right. So because of that, in the times of Hezekiah, they came and they covered the place. This was a very special place, even for the things that we found there. So it would be hard to cover up that place. That was actually the place where David had the musicians play in the city of David. But the moment when the ark moved, the moment when they inaugurated the temple, that service was done there. You couldn't do anything. And even in the archaeology that we found, it proves that according to Jewish law, they had to block and make sure that the people don't worship in different other places. Right. So by finding this in the archaeology proves that. I just want to see something else that okay. The other question that was raised this morning is, why would we have so much contention on Temple Mount and Hebron and all those places? It tells you where the inflammation is, and the inflammation tells you where the battle is. We don't have a battle at that place where he tells you it is. Obviously, the city of David is a very special place, and we have to give it the kavod and the honor of what it is, and purely by what they find there, it's massive against the battle against UNESCO and what they claim. But let's just trace and see where things are, and you can purely by tracing this, you know that whole theory is being refuted.
Harry, Anarina mentioned the temple sifting project and the tiles that they found. We've done a story on that at CBN News. It's remarkable, and how they've been able to connect that to other tiles that King Herod built around his palaces. What other archaeological evidence have they found through that, and that you're aware of?
Well, one of the things, first of all, good question, Chris, of course, and all the coverage that you do, amazing. One of the things that they found that was mentioned here tonight, several times, I myself also mentioned it, was the Ophel. In that area, the Accra tower, built by Antiochus IV, Greek king, which is to do right now with Hanukkah, of course. That was a very, very, dramatic find. I guess about a year and a half ago, 2 years ago. They really solidified the fact, again, like Anarina was saying and Mr. Good, that for sure, the temples had to be, of course, on the Temple Mount. I mean, it's called the Temple Mount. And the reason being that structure, the chakra, which means lechakir, lachkor, even in Greek, it actually means to observe. It was built by Antiochus in order to observe the temple service. And if you notice where they actually found it, It's on the south side, on the top of the mountain there, on the south side of Har HaBayit, of the Temple Mount. And it was tall enough to actually to look inside and see for Antiochus to supervise, quote unquote, the temple, workings and the avoda, the service of the priest, etc., in order to, see if they're doing everything according to the way he wanted. It says in Maccabees that was actually a big problem, a big thorn, as it were, in the side of the Jewish people, because of what he did afterwards and during to the Jewish people. And he was definitely taking away the spiritual side of our service, of our daily service to God. So that was one thing that they found that was very, very important, indicating that, yes, the temple, the way they viewed it, had to be on top of the Temple Mount, perhaps according to my theory at least, a little bit south of where the Dome of the Rock is today, a little bit closer to the Western Wall, which, by the way, I definitely agree with what Mr. Good said about the Antonia Fortress actually coming onto the Temple Mount itself. That was definitely in conjunction with this find of the Chakra Tower. There are other archaeological discoveries in the area. Definitely, Elisha Kroon, of course, found a whole bunch of different things. The bell of the high priest, the golden bell, which was very, it was kept under wraps for a while. And then, sorry? The white stone. The white stone. There was a bell, there was a stone, that a whole bunch of things that he found that were covered up, as it were. I would say gag order, but he definitely wasn't allowed for a while to pronounce them as being something that relates back to the temple for political purposes. And we find that that's a little bit of a problem that we have to deal with when we do find things that are archaeologically connected to the Second Temple, or even earlier. We get a political process that sometimes provides a bit of an obstacle. So what we do know now is there have been a lot of archaeological proofs, but there are more to come for sure.
Yeah. The evidence seems overwhelming, and I shared earlier at the panel earlier this evening that somebody gave me this theory about 10 years ago. And my thinking in my mind was, are you kidding? The evidence seems so obvious. Joseph, you've been researching this 35 years. What was your reaction when you first heard about this contrary theory?
I was given the book. I thought it was a joke. I started the book, and I got maybe 6 pages, and I said, I can't read it. It was so preposterous. There were so many misquotes. There were so many, everything taken out of proportion. Now, since that time, since it became something that is like this epidemic, I mean, there literally are millions of people that believe this. I've gone back, I've read the books, I've watched the videos. On one hand, it's really exciting because it shows a hunger to know the temple. But it's scary because people are so easily misled. And how do we communicate? Here's the real evidence. How do we communicate? Look at valid authorities. Talk to Ir David. You can contact them, City of David. You can contact them. You can ask them questions, and they'll direct you to valid archaeological sources or scholars. Check Hebrew University. Check the Israel Exploration Society. I mean, there's numbers of organizations that will give you who to go to, where to get the information. But yeah, it has become frightening. So I think this is what this conference is in part about, is encouraging everyone here to look at the evidence for yourself, to develop the sources and the resources in order to do these. CBN, by the way, y'all have done some tremendous work on some of your documentaries, and I want to commend you. And that would be another place to check the validity of these reports, because There's stuff all over the web that's just not true. It's not even close to true. The tragedy is it is so easy to check out the truth, and people aren't doing it. So please carry that message back to your communities. Tell people that they need to see and challenge them.
Thank you. And thank you for what CBN News, that's what we try to do. And Arena, I think what people love about what you share in your messages, the story that we did, is your passion for the city of David. And I remember being down near the Pool of Siloam interviewing you. You said you're one of the most luckiest girls in the world to be able to share this passion. And yet this controversy, this theory gives the city of David, a bad name. I mean, it casts aspersions. It doesn't present the truth. How do you feel about that?
I think the thing that was the hardest for me is when people contact you and they say, listen, do you know about this theory? And you go, we've heard about it. There is not an archaeologist that actually agrees with that. And then there's a lot of aggression that comes back at you, being thrown back at you. I've got a little slide there, if we can pull it up, because I want to show you something that actually happened in the video itself. And I wish that people, this is my grandmother's garden, beautiful little garden. And she loves it. You can press the button there. I have now superimposed on it the Queen's private garden right there. Isn't that amazing? Just because I can superimpose something into a picture doesn't mean that it's real. And this is exactly what happened in this video. And I said my grandmother's garden because it's personal. If you want to do something like that, you bring something personal into, and you mess things up. And that's why I want to tell people, just because there are videos out there, you cannot go purely by what a video tells you. Come to the place. Come see it for yourself. Come walk the ancient pathways while you're there, and then you will be able to understand why there's certain dynamics that needs to take place. So I think that's very important, Chris. And I've got something else that also helped us with understanding something about this, and I just want to mention it quickly. I see Shaul Kulok is actually sitting here today. It's a gentleman that's a mathematician, and he's got a CV this long. And according to also empirical truth, but this time from a mathematical point of view, we found that there was a specific planetary line that led exactly on the temple itself, on the Holy of Holies, in the year of the Babylonian exile. And at the end of those 70 years, that line shifted exactly to the most southern point of the city of David. So even from a planetary view, even from a more mathematical view, this other theory is completely pushed out. So, yeah, that's what we deal with.
Yeah, very nice garden your mother had.
Thank you.
Harry, tell us how you reacted when you heard this first heard this theory.
Well, I wasn't sure that it was real, to be honest. I mean, really, a bunch of people contacted me. In fact, I was inundated to this day, to be honest, about certain things that are going on, whether it's the Ark in Ethiopia or, the temple being somehow in the city of David. I wasn't sure if it was real. Like, people are really, what I found out upon further, research is very simple. Similar to what Anarita is saying and Joseph, that people are just taking this out of context. They're taking the scriptural verses that he mentions. I think there's about 10 of them anyway, if I remember correctly. And, people are just want to believe, people are believers, quote unquote. And, okay, it could be that archaeologists are wrong. It could be, that the Jews didn't have it quite right all these years or whatever. But the scripture says A, B, C, and D. And I just feel like saying, the very first reaction was, wait a minute, let me see this for a second. And I realized right off the bat that, a lot of these psuki, these verses, are really being taken out of context. Like Joe was saying, you really have to go and see the context and challenge the hypothesis, do the research. I was sort of like, is this really happening? Like, all these people are really believing, thousands, tens of thousands of people are actually believing this. And it's, I actually, by the way, I actually wrote the Base Institute and this gentleman about a year ago and challenged him to a public debate here in Jerusalem. And I'm still waiting for that opportunity.
Yeah.
I have a book about it, of course, and every word in that book, the Ark Report, really bases this theory. And sort of what Doron was saying, that there's this replacement theory on steroids type of thing aspect, which is that's the frightening part, and even anti-Semitism to that degree, which, when I thought about it, it was like, could it really be that type of, going to that point? But when I found out later what this gentleman had done and actually went and gave his book and some of the videos to some of my colleagues and friends in the government, Danny Danon and some other people in the government, that he's actually making an attempt to go to the highest levels with this. And of course, the Arabs are happy, the Muslims, sure, keep them off the Temple Mount, why not? Yeah, you're right. But no, in fact, so I realized at that point that, we're dealing with an issue, that has to be taken seriously.
Yeah, I think as Lars had mentioned earlier today, you're all in the position of proving, is water wet? And Joseph, I had the similar reaction to you when I was watching one of these videos. I couldn't finish it. I really couldn't go. And yet, it's a very, tempting conclusion. You said at the end of your presentation, it's easy. If the temple's there and the mosque is, if the Dome of the Rock is there, well, there's no problem. We can just go ahead. How do you respond to that?
Pretty much the way that started on this, that in my lecture, is that God set apart a place, and he called it his throne, and he commanded us to learn everything about it, every ceremony, every detail, everything, and that from that point we need to search the evidence. We need to look and see if this will hold up or is it going to fall. And it's very easy to make it fall. The hard thing is that so many of the people, just as you mentioned, so many of the people aren't looking for truth. Because it's anti-Semitic, because we're dealing with a spiritual thing that is behind all of this, and people will get angry, and they will say, well, I don't care. My advice in that is walk away from it. Don't spend your time arguing with those people. Go to the people that will listen. Talk to them, show them, and continue to learn for yourself. Let it be something that you're doing, not because it's right in the sense of we can prove it. Do it because it's biblically right, because it's what God commanded us to do, and it's how that we're to worship, and it's where he teaches us about approaching him and all of these things. Do it for those motivations. I would like to say one thing about the city of David. City of David is a fantastic place. When we study the temple, we don't just study the temple. We study the Shiloh pool, and we study the road that came up, that the pilgrims came. Whenever I go up right now, we go a short ways up the actual road, and then we go into a drainage channel. By the time I get up close to the temple, I'm already in heaven. Because I see, in my mind, I see everything. I see the people coming out to worship. There's great news. I got a sneak peek at it. I'm sure you've seen it. They are completing the old upper road. And we're going to be able to go down that road and go as the ancient pilgrims went. And that you've got to do. I don't care if you live on the moon. It's worth the trip.
Chris,
Yeah,
I want
go
to
ahead,
add that
Anna Ray.
This road is on the western side of the city, and where the other theory places this, they built this massive road leading to nothing.
To the Fortress Antonio.
Yeah, because and there's no road leading up to whatever where they put this theory. So the road by itself also refutes.
Yeah. The archaeological finds. Yeah, go ahead. The archaeological finds there are just simply amazing, and I used to park in the Givati parking lot as well. And where the visitor center is now, it used to be a little orchard, and so but what's happened in the last 15 years is simply astounding. And as you say, Honorina, it's like the dust is shaking off of Jerusalem. Take us from the physical to the spiritual. How important is what's happening here in the city of David right now?
I think that's the most important for what we wanted to establish here today is how, if we veer from understanding what the physical is, we veer spiritually as well. The city of David, the moment when we start, when the city itself shakes off its dust, we can see how it basically has a spiritual, it shakes the heavens. When that happens. If you open up this primordial city, the only thing that she's calling out for is for her sons to come back. When we open up this ancient road, in the time when we open up the ancient road, and this is a verse that you can find in Ecclesiastes where it says, 3 verse 15, after everything there's a time for this and a time for that, it says what is was, what will be was. So there are cycles, and if you open up the physical on these cycles, then we are getting ready for the future as well. So as we are opening up this massive road, the roads to Israel are also being set in place. We have the speed train that you can now literally in 20 minutes get from Ben Gurion to Jerusalem. It's working, right? I just want to make sure. And then they're also working on places that they can literally, with cable cars, bring people right into to Temple Mount, into the city of David. So every time when we're uncovering the ancient paths, it wakes people up to come back. And whatever we are doing in the in the physical, it has tremendous effect in the spiritual as well.
Yeah. Be thinking of any questions. We'll take questions in a few minutes. But before, as I said earlier, at any interview, my last question would like to be anything you'd like to add. So Harry, and then Joseph, and then Anarina. Anything you'd like to add that we haven't discussed yet?
No, nothing. No. Just joking. That's probably, you don't hear that often. Well, just a couple of little things here and there, I guess. One is, in terms of archaeological discoveries, the Temple Mount, the heart by it, if you look at some of the people part of my project, Dr. Gabi Barkai, with the sifting project you were mentioning. So we found over there arrowheads going all the way back to the Babylonian conquest, to Nebuchadnezzar, all the way back to the destruction of the first temple, the Solomonic temple, which is an unbelievable find, and that's something that's going to, it's published and it's coming out. You can actually see these amazing arrowheads. You can look it up. That's one thing that goes even predates the Second Temple, the Herodian Temple, the Antonian Fortress, all the way back. So this is something that's very, very important archaeologically. Everything that's being found now is part of the temple sifting project and other projects in the area. The other thing is there is progress being made on a political level. As we were mentioning that elections are coming up, and we do want to make the Temple Mount an issue, an item to be discussed. It's very important. And that's why, conventions, conferences like this one do play an important part and do get both wanted and unwanted, probably, attention from different, there's left and there's right. And here in Jerusalem, you can sneeze on the left, it'll be interpreted one way, sneeze on the right, another way. You can never do it.
It's Israel.
It's Israel, yeah, exactly. So, Baruch Hashem, thank God that this is taking place. And there are progress, there is progress being made. There's politically, there's supposedly one thing I'll say about the whole peace process, the U.S. brokered process, is that they're planning a train, actually, for the first time, all the way from Saudi Arabia and Oman, for instance, to come in the UAE, all the way to Yerushalayim, to Jerusalem, through Jordan, called the peace train, quote unquote. Kind of cheesy, but okay. But it really is happening. It really is, and there is, that infrastructure is being laid. So we do have a couple of things that are promising in terms of getting people over to the Mount, Jews and non-Jews, Muslims also. There is something great that's going to be happening, and I really feel that, as many of us do here, I think that we are on the verge of something great, a messianic era, whatever you call it, something that's going to come to fruition, and it's going to be a great time. So there is a lot to look forward to with this.
Great. Joseph?
Yeah, I've got one thing that I'd like to share. Frequently, what we hear from people, from Christians, is, I don't need to study a building. I don't need to study the temple because I'm the temple. We're the temple, we're the body of the temple. Let me tell you something. That is not a Christian statement. That is a Jewish statement. That is something that from the very beginning, Jews were taught that there is a physical temple, but there is that the body of Israel is the temple of God. Okay? So what does all this mean? Well, if you want to understand yourself and your body of believers as a temple, you need to understand the physical temple. You need to be involved in what God put there for you to be able to understand identity, who you are, what you are. Now, understand this, that as non-Jews, we have a duty and a responsibility as believers in Hashem to support the Jewish people. It's not a suggestion, it's actually a commandment. Now, in that, we need to support the Jewish right to prayer on the Mount. We're promised that we'll have blessings that come to the entire world. We're told, I believe in the Midrash, that if the Romans had known the value of the temple, they would have taken all the legions of Rome to surround and protect it. So we're able to be involved in that. Now, I go up on the temple. I plan, when the temple is rebuilt, I plan on going up into the temple, into the section that non-Jews can go in. I don't want to go in the sections that Jews can go in. Not that I wouldn't love to see it. I can see it in my mind. I want to be who I am before God and do what God allows me to do. And I want to support them to do what He gives them to do. And that in that, we become Jew and non-Jew together, worshiping before the throne of God. That's it.
Right on. Again, if you have any questions, Joy will be over here in Ann Arena. Anything you'd like to add?
Just to thank the diehards that are here to that sat to the end here, and also the people that really watched. I think those who really wanted to seek the truth tuned in today to really understand, and it's for them that we're happy to do this. I just want to say on the city of David, as we know, it was only rediscovered 150 years ago. It ticked exactly on the Jubilee cycles, which is amazing in itself as well. But the rediscovery tells us now where Zion actually lies. It lies outside of the temple, of the old city, except for Temple Mount. And as we are now being able to mentally make that shift to the true location of Zion itself, of Zion itself, we should actually do that prayerfully, spiritually, and psychologically as well. So from my side, I would just like to ask people to align with Zion, to make sure that keep it in your mind's eye when you pray, like Daniel, and tell as many people as you possibly can about this, because this is pivotal for us moving forward in the exciting times that are coming. Thank you so much. Thanks.
Sure. I guess Daron gets the first question.
All right, I'll take the first question. I want a short one. Whoever one of you wants to take this, I think a good question to ask or to consider is the issue of the Temple Mount myth. Is there a correlation to that myth And for example, the flat earth people, if you understand what I'm talking about, in the effects of that, the way we accept these myths based on the availability of, in the quickness of social media and internet, et cetera, in pushing these ideas to huge masses of people to believing these myths. And you know, do you understand the question?
Sorry, to whom is this?
Yeah. To whoever wants to take that one.
Who wants to start?
Okay. So the question is like the flat earth and the relationship of the flat earth. My people perish because of lack of knowledge. And we're plagued right now with so many things that indicate a real spiritual shallowness in those that say they're believers in Hashem and believers in Yeshua. Not among all people, but the numbers are alarming. So there needs to be a concerted effort to, number one, to confront these myths, to confront these lies, and to be able to say, look, here's what we have. Do prep work before you talk to somebody. Have your information in order. Have good sources. Be able to lay it out. Again, I would repeat, if somebody just wants to argue, I would wipe my feet and go on. Go to the next person. But don't let the lies just be, don't let them just, I don't address them. They have to be addressed. They have to be confronted. And again, it's all going to come back to the Jews changed this. The Jews changed that. It's anti-Semitic. It has one main source it's coming from, and that's the enemy. And it comes in different forms. But the flat earth, the lunar Sabbath, I think is what another one that they call. I don't know if you're involved in that or even know what I'm talking about. But that the Sabbath is not the Sabbath. That the Jews have that wrong. And that they changed this, okay? Just understand the source, but get your information and confront it.
And Irina or Harry, you want to address that or go to the next question?
Really 2 seconds. The only thing I wanted to add is that really was mentioned before is that I think that it is a spiritual, it's like a spiritual war that we're facing here. It's not just physical, it's not just about where the temple is or isn't. There are spiritual forces now that are, darkness is the darkest before the dawn, right? So it is a fight, and we're going to win. We will. Hashem will win.
Next question.
Hey, so I have two quick questions. The first one, I generally agree with what you guys said. I also was totally shocked when I heard about this conspiracy theory, and I live here in Jerusalem, so I was like, where did these guys get these ideas from? Anyway, I looked at some of their circumstantial evidence, and it makes me wonder, maybe there's a grain of truth. Maybe, for example, in the city of David, that David kept the ark there for a while. Is there any archaeological evidence of David keeping it, or maybe Melchizedek maybe having some sort of like little something, altar or something like that in the city of David? Is there any possibility of that?
Okay, to come to the first one, that we said that there's a high probability that the place where they sort of state that the temple was actually the place where the temple, the ark was kept in the interim phase. So it's a high probability, especially if you go and see where that is. The Matzevah that you're speaking about, Eli Shukrun also speaks very highly of it, that it might be from the times of Melchizedek, to my understanding. The only thing that we know about that stone is that they keep it away from how can I say? I don't want to say from the public, but it is a place that we have to protect. Yes, because they know that whatever the meaning or the significance of the stone is, it's very important. Yeah.
Yeah, next question. Yeah.
Sorry, I just want to add, if I may, a very short point on what Adarina just said. that at the end of King David's life, there's a midrash that says, and I believe also in the Talmud, a reference that actually says that David moved the ark from that point, where it was temporarily in the city of David, over to where put it this way, now it's called the Mount Zion, where King David is buried. He actually mentioned, and there's a reference to this, that he wanted to be buried where the provincial tent of the ark was. So before he passed away, we know that the ark moved actually to the current, what we now call the Mount Zion, where King David is buried, where he has his, his tomb, basically. So it was there as well. It sort of moved in transit from city of David, but later became also called Ir David later on. And this is something maybe we'll hear more about. That the Ir David was actually called, sort of switched in the latter part of King David's life, also to refer to what we now know as the Mount Zion, where he's buried. So the ark was actually there in that place for a while at the end there, before being moved into the temple.
Go ahead, next question.
Okay, my question touches on the very subject of this conference. Everybody will agree that the source of information, main source of information, is the Israeli Bible. But you got to be people aware that the books of the Israeli Bible, the canon that defines the books of the Israeli Bible, was closed several centuries before the Common Era, at the time of Ezra and Nehemiah, by the people, or the sages of the big assembly. Now, whatever the hundreds of times that the word Jerusalem is used in the Israeli Bible, it refers to the strip of land south of the Temple Mount, and that's it, to this part that presently is just archaeological remains in an Arab village. For example, the question comes as follows. If we read Isaiah 33:20, he says, "Look upon Zion, the city of our festivities. Your eye will see Jerusalem." But if we now go and do the same recommendation of Isaiah, we will not see Jerusalem. The Jerusalem that is the core of the redemption of Israel, in my understanding, humble understanding, it looks like it has been completely forgotten. When we talk about Jerusalem, what Jerusalem we talk about? This is my question. Which Jerusalem we talk about? When we pray in the book, the Jews, I'm a Jew, and we pray every day, or 3 times a day, we pray, and this prayer was prepared by the people of the big assembly in the time of Ezra and Nehemiah, and we mentioned there, Hashem should build Jerusalem. Which Jerusalem? When we talk about the Temple Mount, we have to understand that the big piece for the recovery of the Temple Mount has been lost. We have to build Jerusalem because it's
Yeah, what's the question?
No, but you should understand the question. I have to finish to understand the question because in the Talmud, in Ta'anit 5a, is written, is the question now, is written, I will not, regarding the God of Israel, I will not enter the heavenly Jerusalem till I don't enter the earthly Jerusalem.
So the question is what?
My question is, why we have forgotten that we have to first build Jerusalem?
And that you refer to Ir David. To what Jerusalem do you refer to? That the Jerusalem of the times when that was written, and that would be the city of David.
This Jerusalem is in the southern part.
That's it.
And the upper part, touching to the southern border of the Temple Mount, is the Milo, what was built by Shlomo Melech.
Correct.
It's not a short thing, little.
And the question is that place specifically should be rebuilt. Okay. Okay. I think what needs to happen is we first have to lay bare the blueprint of the city again to get to the foundations before we can build it up again. Basically, the heart of Jerusalem, which is the city of David, is only now being kick-started. The bigger Jerusalem has obviously been built, and that's part of the prophecy that's being fulfilled already. You will stretch to the right and to the left. But correct, the core and the nucleus is still being excavated right now before we can...
Yeah. So we'll have to go to the next question right now.
One of the concerns that I believe that the Christians have concerning the reestablishment of the temple is the reinstitution of sacrifices. And for those who have not studied the difference between the sacrifices and understanding why the peace offerings are still supposed to be given, could you address that also in light of the lack of understanding concerning the importance of not eating things like halal meats, which are pervasive through America, even not having to be recorded on the packages that you buy, so they're eating foods that are not even, these things are tied together. Could you address that issue so that maybe it can spark the interest of the Christians out there to study the importance of this topic?
All right. What I'll do is I'll address at least the first part of the question. But just before I do, in answer, with all due respect to the gentleman before that, the Jerusalem that he's referring to be built is the one that he's standing in right now. Okay. This is the Jerusalem that we're in right now. That's what's being rebuilt. Thank God. Now, that's right. It's expanding every day. Now, with respect, it's a good question with respect to sacrifices. This really is an issue. In fact, a lot of places that wanted to take my book, different, all kinds of community centers, Christian and all kinds of other faiths. One of the directors that came up to me said, "Your book is awesome." Problem is, it mentions the temple, which is great, but it mentions sacrifices, that sacrifices will be reinstated. First of all, not all, you have to know which ones will be and which ones won't be. According to the Torah, the majority of sacrifices when Mashiach comes, when the Messiah comes and we have the third temple, will not be held. The Passover sacrifices and the ones we do on Sukkot and the Feast of Tabernacles and others that we do, there's only two that will remain. One, and then as the lady was saying, that we have to understand the nature of the sacrifices and why we bring them. The one that will remain is called the Thanksgiving sacrifice, where we give thanks to God for what we have, especially for being saved from certain things, from, that we, for instance, traveling overseas, which many of you have come. Thank you for coming. We give a Thanksgiving sacrifice for that, or other, life saved, when a person's life is saved miraculously or not, or getting out of prison. There's all kinds of different definitions. But when, in the future, when the temple is reinstated, this sacrifice will, for any people, anybody, Jew and non-Jew, can bring this sacrifice, this Thanksgiving sacrifice. The other one that will be there is called the Korban Tamid, which is the one that we give in the morning and the one that we give at night, which is an olah. It's a special sacrifice that's given, which really is given not only for the glory of God, but also to keep up the temple service. It's an actual practical thing. But all the other sacrifices will not be. So there is something that, you have to really know exactly what we're talking about and the reasons behind the sacrifices, etc., which makes sense. The second part of the question, with reference to halal meat, I'm not a pro about that, but there are many it's not for a Jew, for a religious Jew. It's not permitted to eat anything other than kosher meat, which is there's of course here in Israel everything is political, so that also is a matter of opinion. What's kosher meat? That's for another conference, but basically, yeah. But essentially, a religious Jew can't eat halal meat, but halal meat does have certain similarities to kosher meat. It's also slaughtered. It's not just, the cow isn't just like shot, and religious Muslims do adhere by that strictly, and also eat kosher meat as well, which is an even stricter form of kashrut, of how do you say kashrut? Kosher, observance. So whether a non-Jew can eat halal meat or not is that's another discussion. I've never heard personally that it's forbidden for a non-Muslim to eat halal meat. I'm not sure where that personally comes from, but there may be a source to it. In the meantime, though, I think that, look, at the end of the day, if it brings people together, if people can respect the other person's dietary laws, which we have here, actually, everything was kosher. Thank you. That's a start. Yeah.
Right. John, you get the next question.
Yeah, my question pertains to the water sources on the Temple Mount, and we were discussing with Rico Cortez earlier that there's a wonderful cistern or something underneath, kind of just southeast of where the altar would have been, and it kind of points up towards the temple. It's kind of elongated, a key cistern. Is there any use for, any clues in that cistern to some drain off the roof of the actual temple building? Is that correct?
That's correct. The cistern you're referring to is, Comrade Schick called it Cistern 28, and Charles Ward called it Cistern 5. In the Second Temple period, it was not a cistern. It was a tunnel system. Now, we believe that this tunnel system was used to, it was a key to the water supply. In other words, down inside this tunnel, they had a pumping system to a cistern below it. And so, number one, that's how that particular system is called a fixed cistern or fixed well. So, I have a friend that years ago, she worked down at Ir David, and her specialty was the water. She is one of the leading authorities here in Jerusalem on the ancient water supply. Now, she worked with me on this, and basically, what we dealt with is in the Mishnah, it says that this is a fixed well. Okay, so what's a fixed well? I mean, a well is a well. So if you have a fixed well, what does it mean? Well, what we believe it means is that it was fed by a spring underneath, so that it had a constant, permanent supply of water. It wasn't dependent on rainwater. It wasn't dependent on water being transferred to it by conduits. It had its own water supply. So that's one of the big mysteries, or one of the big things that we see in this particular system, or cistern or tunnel. At the end of the tunnel, there's a little drain on the surface of the Temple Mount that comes down into the tunnel. That drain has a conduit that goes back. The conduit is very short. It would be, I'm going to guess, from me to you. It's a very short conduit. Now, that conduit, we located several what we call points of congruence, something that Jim uses as points of congruence, things that we can identify. And we arrived at the size of the cubit. We arrived at where the temple building was, We could divide it down into the widths of the walls, the widths of the stairways, the widths of the offices, the width of the Holy of Holies or the holy place, and so forth. There is what is described in Midot in the Mishnah. There's a drain that comes off the top of the temple building. It starts on the western side. It comes east to the bottom. Now that drain is called the Beit Hordat Habayim. Okay, it's the drain for any rainwater, snow, anything that collects on the temple building to come down. Turns out that when we put all this together, we found that that conduit that was drawn 100 years ago by the Palestine Exploration Fund, they discovered it, the one that goes from me to you, that empties into cistern 28 or tunnel 28, comes exactly to the place that this drain off the top of the Temple Mount would empty. So we believe that that is precisely having that measurement. It allows us to get the exact measurements for almost all the buildings and structures, gates on the Temple Mount, the location of the altar. It was like the key that unlocked it all.
Wow. We're going to have to limit it to 2 more questions. So,
I hope that my question is quick. You all have done a fantastic job of dismantling the Martin alternate temple theory, temple location theory. However, the attraction to the theory, how do I say this, it's a monster with lots and lots of tentacles, and there just isn't time to address all of those issues. Unfortunately, I could bring up, maybe a few facts that support the Martin theory that hasn't been addressed today. Is there a resource that someone can turn to that perhaps methodically goes through and demonstrates point by point why this theory is foolishness, instead of just saying, this is why it can't be, and you've done a good job of saying it wasn't in City of David. Awesome, great job. What about all the other dozens of details or facts that seem to support the theory? Where can we turn to?
I've got some lectures that go for a few hours. I'd be glad to come and do a 10-hour session on it.
How about you, Anna Rita?
I just want to say it's not point by point, it's layer by layer, because there are things that he addresses at one level that actually kicks out on a completely different level. So it's a psychological thing that's much deeper. I don't know if anybody's going to be able to put a point by pointer there. Maybe if you can write down the points by point, then maybe we can start looking at them and see how we can dismantle it. But that's a massive job to really go look into this video and to...
It's a massive beast.
Yeah. Harry, go ahead.
Well, when you have a massive beast, in my opinion, sometimes it's not worth it to give it the attention. It's just not, because the more attention you give it, the more credibility you give it to a certain degree. If you really want a point-by-point breakdown, that's going to take, hours and a lot of work, and it's not worth it, in my opinion. That's about it.
Yeah. Go ahead, a final question.
So I would like to move to a vision forward, which is going all the way to the millennial and the millennial kingdom, and Messiah is here. Then we're looking at the Ezekiel temple. So what do you see as being the relation to, between the temple that will now be built, as all the pictures, all the kind of drawings, and the Temple Institute, they seem to be, it looks like it would be like the second temple. But then if you look at the Ezekiel drawing, it seems to be something different. And Amarita, I think you mentioned Ezekiel 43, which was referring to a different kind of temple. So how do you see the relationship between these two, and how will the transfer be between these two?
I think I understand what you're saying, is that the pictures we see that they're making for the next temple seem to be after the model of the second temple, and not after the Ezekiel temple. Yes. Well, the temple that we're preparing to build right now has to be built according to the blueprint of the last existing temple. When Messiah comes, after that point, it'll go to the Yehezkel temple. All of that will still be called the third temple because, like the second temple had 3 phases, the Ezra temple or Zerubbabel, the Hasmonean, and the Herodian, because it was in one continuous span without a break. It was called the second temple. So we'll build according to the model of the last until Messiah comes, and then we don't have enough detail in Yehezkel to build that temple yet, till he comes.
I just want to say I'm not an authority on this to tell you exactly what the differences are going to be, but if you go to the people from the Temple Institute, they have studied the laws in depth, and what they drew up there is obviously according to deep halachic sources that they went into, and I think you should get somebody like that to really explain to you the differences and why they, because they already had some blueprints, they have blueprints ready. So they would be the best to answer that question.
I would like to add one thing that I do remember regarding this topic, that it says in the Talmud that those who built, that Ezra and Nehemiah that built the second temple actually took 4 things from Yehezkel's temple, Ezekiel's temple, in the effort and with the view to try and make the second temple a permanent temple, like Yehezkel's temple will be. So they took 4 things because they really wanted the second temple to be permanent. It lasted 420 years, 10 years longer than the first temple, than King Solomon's temple. But one of these things was, for instance, in the women's courtyard, the 4 chambers on the perimeter had open ceilings, like they're straight up. They didn't have a roof. That is straight out of Ezekiel. That element is straight out of Ezekiel, and that was taken on purpose and used in the second temple all the way to the end, to the Herodian structure as well. That's just one example. There are 3 other examples that they actually used. They took from Ezekiel for that purpose. Hope that helps.
Yeah, and I was going to answer the previous question about where to get some information. I would certainly recommend Joseph Good's information, Anna Rena, and Harry Moskoff, as well as Cry for Zion. And as I said earlier, I'd be remiss not to say CBN News as well. So, so thank you, Anna Rena, Joseph, and Harry for an excellent panel and very insightful. And I wanted to invite John Erneson and Doron Kadar to come up and conclude the conference.
All right, so for those of you brave souls who've remained to the end here, thank you very much. I want to thank our wonderful guests who have come here, spent their time, their hard-earned money to come to this convention, to educate you, because they're doing it for a passion. I'm telling you, all the speakers here, they're not here for the glory, they're not here for any special benefit. They're here because they're passionate about the truth and sharing that with really the world and anybody who's interested in truth. So thank you guys. You're an amazing team. Without you, this convention could not have happened. Without your passion, without your zeal, without your hard years long of digging in the dirt, getting dirty, getting on your knees. And for me, I come from the world of security, okay? That was not a passion of mine. But following along you guys and having you take me on this journey, and John, has been a blessing. It's been an honor. And I really respect all the hard work that you've done, and I want to thank you. Finally, I also want to thank our team, the Cry for Zion team that has been working tirelessly around the clock to make this event happen with all the organization, the flyers, the banners, the little, okay, these things, okay, all of that takes a lot of time and hard work, registrations, making order of everything, making sure everybody's fed, taken care of. Thank you for the Cry for Zion staff and team. And then, of course, finally, we want to thank the
begging Heritage Center for graciously allowing us to have this event here, to host it here, and we want to thank them as well.
I also want to thank all the volunteers who contributed to this event. Thank you so much. You just jumped in and pitched in to make this happen. Thank you for your passion and for your help. The question that came here before, where's a resource that we can use that's short and got some good points in it? That's why we held this whole convention, and that's why we asked Joseph Good to condense his fire hose of information into a 45-minute lecture or something like that will be on YouTube that people can use. So when you see this event, hopefully it'll be divided up also into good little clips and nuggets you can use on YouTube, send to people. So this lecture by Joseph Good, send it to people. There's your resource right there. Before we go anywhere, let's just mention we had some questions about the field trips that are happening tomorrow. There is in your information packet, read it carefully about the field trips that are happening. We have tomorrow, it says, if you have registered for ascending the Temple Mount on Thursday, 6th of December, please be at the entrance to the ramp going up to the mount at 8:45, where Doron Kedar, I believe also Mr. Joseph Good, will be meeting up with the group there at that time. The time on the Temple Mount will be approximately 1.5 to 2 hours, politically permitting, and it should be over by 11. Yes, also, please, there are some announcements. Because of the political situation, we've been